The age of giants was ending, though the ROC, in its sun-drenched kingdom of sky, did not yet know it. For millennia, its shadow had been the only cloud on a clear day, its cry the only thunder. From its mountain nest, a fortress woven from entire forests and the ribs of forgotten behemoths, it surveyed a world that was utterly and completely its own. The great whales of the deep were its playthings, snatched from the waves like silver fish. The mammoths that trudged across the frozen plains were but a single meal. The ROC was more than a creature. It was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the world's ancient, untamed power. Its golden age was a tapestry of endless blue skies, abundant hunts, and a silence broken only by the beat of its own colossal wings. But the world, as it always does, was beginning to change. The first signs were subtle, whispers on the wind that the ROC, in its confidence, chose to ignore. The air itself began to feel different. A strange warmth crept into the winds that once carried the crisp scent of alpine snow. The vast, turquoise oceans, which had always teemed with life, began to show unsettling patches of dull, lifeless green. The currents shifted, becoming erratic and unpredictable, pulling the great sea creatures into unfamiliar depths where the ROC's keen eyes could not follow. Down below, the lush grasslands that fed the giant herbivores started to brown at the edges, turning brittle and thin. The herds, once so vast they looked like a moving landscape, began to shrink. The climate, the very breath of the planet, was becoming shallow and feverish. The ROC's hunts, once effortless displays of aerial dominance, became grueling expeditions. It had to fly further, soaring for days over landscapes that were increasingly barren. The familiar trails of its prey grew faint, then disappeared altogether. The mighty mammoths, with their rich, fatty meat, were the first to vanish. The ROC would circle for an entire day over their ancestral grazing grounds, seeing nothing but bones bleached white by the relentless sun. Desperation began to gnaw at the titan. It started hunting smaller, less satisfying prey creatures it would have ignored in ages past. The hunger was a new and unwelcome companion, a constant, dull ache that a single kill could no longer satisfy. The sky, once a kingdom of freedom, was becoming a vast, empty prison. And as the old world faded, a new one was being born. Down on the ground, a different kind of creature was thriving in this changing world. Humans, their settlements, once scattered and timid, exploded into sprawling cities of stone and wood. Their ambition was carved into the very landscape. Great roads cut through ancient forests, and towering structures reached for the sky, challenging the ROC's domain. Most unnerving of all were their ships. Fleets of them, with proud sails and sharp prows, began to venture into the ROC's coastal hunting grounds, scattering the sea life and polluting the waters with their refuse. The world was no longer quiet. It was filled with the clamor of hammers, the shouting of commands, and the groaning of timber as humanity relentlessly expanded its dominion, inch by inch encroaching on the territory of the gods. The first true confrontation was inevitable. A human army, a glistening river of bronze and steel, marched into the foothills below the ROC's nest. They saw the great bird, not with awe, but with a mixture of fear and ambition. They saw it as a monster to be conquered, a prize to be won. As the ROC descended, expecting the column of tiny creatures to scatter as all others did, it was met with a storm. A black cloud of arrows rose to meet it, pattering uselessly against its iron-hard feathers. Then came the larger bolts from their siege engines. The bullet, one struck its leg, a sharp, stinging pain it had never felt before, more annoying than They even launched pots of fire that burst against its chest, but the flames were snuffed out by the sheer force of its wings. The ROC let out a cry of fury and contempt, scattering the army with a single powerful downdraft, but it left with a sense of unease. They were weak, yet they were not afraid. Emboldened and angered, the ROC decided to strike back at the source of the infestation. It flew towards one of their largest cities, a fortress of high walls and proud towers. This was not a panicked column of soldiers. This was a prepared, fortified enemy. As it swooped down, the sky turned dark with projectiles. Thousands of arrows, volley after volley, created a stinging rain. Heavy, iron-tipped bolts from ballistae mounted on the walls struck with brutal force, not just stinging, but piercing. One slammed into the joint of its wing, sending a jolt of agony through its body. For the first time in its existence, the ROC felt true, debilitating pain. It faltered in the air, its powerful flight becoming clumsy. With a scream of frustration and agony, it was forced to retreat, leaving behind a trail of its own golden blood. The tiny, fragile creatures had wounded a god. The world itself seemed to be turning against it. The skies, once so clear and predictable, became treacherous. Plumes of black, choking ash from newly awakened volcanoes would suddenly fill the air, scarring its lungs and blinding its eyes. Strange, acrid fogs would roll in from the sea, toxins that made the air itself feel poisonous. Violent, unnatural storms would materialize out of nowhere, with winds strong enough to challenge even its immense power, forcing it to land and seek shelter like a common bird. Even the deserts, once places of serene, clean heat, became deadly. Winds would whip up not just sand, but a fine, toxic dust that coated its feathers and made breathing an ordeal. The very elements, which had once been the instruments of its power, were now its enemies. Even the ancient packs of predator and prey were breaking down. The few remaining megafauna, the other giants of this dying age, grew desperate and aggressive. A pair of saber-toothed titans, starving and bold, dared to attack the ROC when it landed to drink from a river, forcing it into a bloody battle on the ground. Winged rivals, great drakes and wyverns pushed from their own territories, began to challenge the ROC for control of the skies, fighting viciously over the last remaining scraps of food. The world had become a brutal, chaotic free-for-all, where every creature, great and small, fought for its own survival. The old order was gone, replaced by the law of pure, savage desperation. There was no longer a king. There were only survivors, wounded, exhausted, and hungry. The ROC finally limped back through the hostile skies toward its mountain nest. Its body ached from a dozen injuries. The deep gash in its wing throbbed with every beat, a constant reminder of its humiliation at the hands of humans. Its lungs burned from the volcanic smog, and its magnificent golden plumage was stained with blood and soot. It landed heavily on the edge of its colossal nest, a place that was once a symbol of its absolute power. But now, it felt less like a throne and more like a refuge. Perhaps the last safe place in a world that no longer wanted it. As the sun set, casting long, mournful shadows across the peaks, the ROC looked out over its diminished kingdom. The golden age was over. The twilight had begun. The great bird settled into its nest, curling its head beneath its wounded wing. The wind whistling through the peaks no longer sounded like a song of praise, but like a lament. It carried the distant, growing noise of humanity, the stench of their fires, and the taste of a poisoned world. Sleep did not come easily. It was haunted by the ache of its wounds and the gnawing emptiness in its belly. But more than that, it was haunted by a new feeling, an emotion it had never known in all its millennia of rule. Fear. Fear of the tiny, clever creatures below. Fear of the changing, hostile world, and fear of the coming darkness. A long night from which it might never again rise to greet the dawn. The king of the skies was alone on its mountain, waiting for an end it could now see coming as clearly as it once saw its prey from a mile high. Thank you so much for watching. If you were captivated by the story of the ROC, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of myth and legend. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep looking up.